Morning, everyone. It's 11:30. Thank you for attending our fourth transportation virtual professional development on alternative fuel options for school buses. I'm Joe Marquardt. I'm the Director of Business Services for the School District of New London, and I will be leading the session this morning. A few housekeeping items before we get. Today's presentation is being recorded and will be posted later this week. You access these at any time by logging into your WASBO profile. If you have any questions, raise your hand using the reaction tab at the bottom of your screen. You may hover over it to up, and we will be monitoring this and call on you when there's an opening so you can ask your question and ask it for you as well. Now, we're also monitoring the chat during the process as well. Please mute when you're not speaking to avoid any background noise for these. Watch for an email from WASBO later this afternoon with a link to evaluate today's transportation tidbits. Your feedback will help us plan for future topics. Presenters, WASBO staff will put this link in the chat window at the end of the presentation. Also, thank you to Verigy for sponsoring today's webinar. Verigy provides turnkey engineering and construction services focused on energy efficiency upgrade, fleet vehicle electrification, and sustainability, comprehensive energy solutions and service. On to our today, it is my pleasure to introduce our presenter, Ty Breitlow. Ty serves as District Administrator for the School District of Elmira. He joined the School District of Elmira in July of 2022 and is excited to share his experience and their journey on alternative fuel options for school buses. So, Ty, off to you.
Thanks, Joe. Good morning, everyone. Appreciate the time and opportunity to explain to you our journey a little bit here at the School District of Elmira. As Joe said, this is my first year of Elmira. Prior to that, I was the School District Administrator at Randolph School District, another small rural district that owned and operated its own fleet. Prior to that, I was the high school principal at Chilton High School on the east side of Lake Winnebago. And then prior to that, I was a social studies teacher and dean of students at Arrowhead Union High School. So I've had a lot of experience, but despite the suburbness of the Arrowhead Union School District, I do still see that as a rural or more rural area. So that's a little bit about me. Let me get to my slideshow. I do have a slideshow for you all today. I hope it's interesting and engaging for you all. And we've got a lot of time together, so hopefully I'll keep it moving along quickly. So this is our journey to an improved fleet. A little bit about our district. We're about 65 square miles that generally follows the 175 or 41 corridor. We go north to Byron and south to Theresa. We're a Division III school of about 1,000 students. We've got 2 school buildings. We've got a K-12 in Elmira, and then we have a 4K through 4 in Theresa called the Theresa Learning Community. We have 13 buses in our fleet. We have 8 and sometimes 7 bus routes. Each are anywhere. Our longest one is 72 miles, sometimes 77, depending upon ridership. And then at the low end, we're on the low 60s, but we average about 65. We have a midday route, and we have AIM and PN stops at both buildings. From during the time of COVID, when we had a little bit less of ridership and some of the sanitation precautions, we were only utilizing four buses. So, and that was a little counterintuitive based on seat assignments that some of the recommendations held for school transportation. Our buildings and grounds director is a formal diesel tech for waste management. So a ton of familiarity with the engine, the engineering, maintenance, diagnostic, and repair. We have 8 regular drivers and 3 sub drivers, so we're fairly fortunate in that way. And our buses park either at our school district parking lot or at drivers' homes, but regardless, they are outside 24/7, 365. And that's a great lead into the fact that spring in Wisconsin is difficult with field trips, co-curriculars, and then obviously the weather. So I'm sure you all share that frustration of spring in Wisconsin and transportation. You can see on the graphic on the right, that's a little bit about our fleet. The color coding is such that the red Freightliners that are there built by Thomas, those are ones that we have designated as eligible for the EPA Clean Bus Program. I'll speak more about that as we move through the presentation. The green one is our lone gasoline bus. The yellows are our diesels, and then the rest of those are propanes, and you can see the years in which we have them. We anticipate about a lifetime of 10 years max on our buses. We're seeing a little bit more like 8 years. We do currently have 3 buses that are inoperable. Those are ones in red. And so that's why it made sense for us to pursue the EPA Clean Bus Program. Largely in Lomira, we have had a relationship with Bluebird. And so that's where a lot of the familiarity with Bluebird comes in, whereas at Randolph, they were very much and appreciated the international types of buses. Moving along, one of the things that we just had happen to us is we had a bus fire. Actually, the school bus, the van that's parked next to it caught fire, and then that caught our bus on fire. So that destroyed one of our buses. And then we also got a semi truck driver slid into and T-boned another bus driver. So totaled both of those out. And so we've been working really hard to try and replace them and do that quickly. So just as we kind of talk through this a little bit, the transition from diesel to propane started well before I arrived here. The predecessor in my chair saw a lot of the disadvantages and just started to move that in that direction. And slowly, as buses aged out, they were replaced with more and more propane, as you saw from that fleet graphic. The advantages we see to propane are that there's no engine heaters to plug in. They do heat up quickly in the cold elements. Obviously, those of you that are operating diesels, you should know about the fact that diesel fuel gels up. And when that fuel gels up, your fuel filters are going to get clogged with the paraffin, and they either need to be replaced or cleaned in order to be fully operable. So if you didn't know that, make sure that that's a known piece for your maintenance crew. A significant advantage for us in terms of utilizing propane is that we lock in our fuel rates for the entire year. And so we can project out what our fuel budget must be. And right now for next year, we're looking at around $1.57. And so utilizing that in our budget for fiscal year 23-24. I'll talk a little bit more about this in a few minutes, but there is simply just less maintenance and overall cost to maintain. You don't have any of the DEF fluid, another separate chemical with another system that needs to be maintained. Excuse me. We do have a propane distributor in Lomira, which I wouldn't say there was any significant advantage until this year, from a context that we were driving to there's a gas station that had a propane fill, and the bottom line, it was difficult for us to have 16-year-old, 18-year-old young adults filling our tanks. We would get some wrong receipts in terms of how much was pumped. And so what we ended up doing was we worked with the local propane distributor and at their filling station, and they created a bus filling station. So they have a tank there that is specifically for the school district of Lomira buses. They took all of our drivers through propane filling training. And so now all they need to do, they don't need any WEX cards or anything. That's our tank. Our bus drivers have the keys for that tank. And so they go and they fill up, and they do fill up, just so you're all aware, they fill up about every week. For our routes, every week takes them down to about a half a tank. And so whereas our diesel routes, you're filling up about once every other week. So we'll talk a little bit more about the range and the disadvantages piece. The bottom line is, according to our drivers, propane buses run quieter. You can hear the road, you can hear the kids, and you can hear the traffic. The biggest hurdle I think we overcome is getting our drivers to actually step into driving one. And once they do drive one, they haven't really gone back. We have two individuals who swore by diesels for the longest time, and then when we finally got them into a propane, they won't go back. And one of those drivers, her husband actually drove diesels for 32 years as part of a trucking company. So to me, that speaks very much to the similarities and advantages to propane. When you have somebody that's a staunch supporter of diesel. Some of the disadvantages to propane is the range, and that's the biggest thing. As I told you, we're filling up once a week, but really we're operating in a 400-mile range, which means from the school district of Elmira, we're really talking north to Wausau. We can't get to Tomahawk, and west to Sparta. We can't get to La Crosse. And we can get to those places, obviously, but then we need to figure out refueling. And I would say the biggest drawback to propane would be the fact that it requires some significant planning in terms of locating a propane filling station that will fit your buses. And typically, when you need to refuel, it's not always within business hours. And so it requires some known locations, some relationships across the state to really figure out exactly where you can refuel and when. And really, that's the only time that we see any changes in fuel prices. Sometimes there's a fill fee that's tacked on, or pieces like that. But there are a few other pieces. Some people have reported that the torque isn't quite as great with the propane when you've got a bus load full of children or adults for that matter. And so when we've got some rolling hills on the southern end of our district, sometimes there's some reports that the torque just isn't as great. The bus has to work a little bit harder to get up those hills. I'm sure many of you know that those diesel Cummins engines just love load. And so when we have a full bus like that, you can, obviously that's where the diesels show why they're so great. I commented a little bit about the specialized training to fill up. It's not long, but it does require some specialized training, and there's some forms you need to fill out, in order to fill up. And then this last one might be a little bit more unique to the school district of Elmira. We utilize our bus vendor for their warranty service, and our vendor only has one guy who's responsible for all of the repairs in the state. And so service is not easily scheduled, and then it can be rescheduled. And so we find ourselves out of buses at some point. So with 3 inoperable buses, we've really only got one spare. And so if we've got one down, we have all of our buses utilizing the routes, which then creates an issue when you've got things like golf, softball, and baseball in the spring of Wisconsin that need to leave before the routes are completed. So that leads us to having to rent buses from other school districts or to contract with a transportation service. So Joe, just really quickly, did anything get into the chat there? before I move
Nothing
on?
yet, nothing yet.
Okay, well, if there's any other questions about advantages, disadvantages to propane, don't hesitate to ask. The For us, the advantages are clear. And obviously the fact that the drivers are supportive of them makes a tremendous difference. Moving along, just some related info, just the miles per gallon that we have tracked for our buses. With diesels, we're getting 8 to 9, and the reason I use the split is generally we're only getting 8 miles to the gallon when you have children driving. That extra weight sucks that additional gas. Gasoline is 6 to 7 miles per gallon, and propane we're getting 4 to 5 miles per gallon. And again, we're at around like $1.57, $1.60 per gallon of propane, and so it does make some fiscal sense. Unfortunately, with it being my first year, we have yet to track diesel fuel versus propane cost savings. That's something that if I was invited back to do this again next year, I would probably have that data for you. The reason we don't have it is because I have had to put some significant time into looking at electric buses. And so I put down there at the end the fact that the EV Vision, which is a Bluebird bus, has about 120-mile range. And we'll talk a little bit further about the EV program coming up. Just to conclude a little bit, as I had let you know, our buildings and grounds director is a former waste management diesel tech. And these are some of his comments. The fact that oil changes are much quicker. Diesels have multiple filters for fuel and water separators. And when changing those, there's a lot more piping. So you're in more confined, hard to reach areas. And obviously, a diesel engine takes 16 quarts of oil, whereas a propane bus only takes 8 quarts. And in addition to that, those 8 quarts are conventional motor oil. It doesn't need to be synthetic or any of the high grade like some of the diesels. So you're going to see some cost savings there. In the diesels, it's harder to diagnose when you've got an issue. There's a little bit more testing procedures that need to go through. And in addition to that, when a diesel bus goes into D-rate or limp mode, as it's known, you experience that loss of power. And if you know anything about how diesel techs diagnose a lot of stuff, if they're really good, right, they can drive a vehicle and know exactly what's going on with it in order to diagnose a problem. Tougher to do when you know the state DOT mandates the fact that these types of vehicles go into limp mode. And then finally, the time in repair. Our buildings and grounds director talks a lot about the issues that are because of the DEF regen system. Talks a lot about how the fact that the regen system needs to get up to around 2,000 degrees to eliminate that carbon. And because of that, your buses are going to run hotter. The parts are going to wear quicker. And they're more, those regen systems are expensive to repair. So, and obviously I commented already about the piping, and then there's soot, and soot, as you know, makes things look dirty. For us, the soot does become a problem, primarily because we don't have really a bus wash. And so salt and soot are an awful combination in terms of your metal parts on your bus. So just a few things according to our guys that you should definitely be aware of. And again, that's why the transition to propane for us has been advantageous, to say the least. So I have said to our drivers that because of the range issues with propane, that we will always have a diverse fleet. And so there will be a need for diesels, there will be a need for gas buses, and certainly as we experiment or dip our toes into the electric buses, we're still going to need a few of these others for some of the longer trips. And then obviously because the infrastructure for electric vehicles just simply isn't there yet. It would have been made, let's get to it. I'll get to that in a minute. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So let me check the chat quick before I go into this. Yeah, we're good. Okay. So in October of 2022, I should say in August of 2022, one of the first things we did was we applied for the EPA Clean School Bus Program. And this is a program that's meant to really get diesel buses off of the streets. So they're awarding 500 million per year for the next 5 years in order to replace buses with zero emission buses. The program allows any school district that has an eligible bus, which is a 2010 or older diesel bus, to apply to replace it with either a propane or electric vehicle. And one of the things that I really want to draw your attention to here is going back to our fleet. Now, the criteria said that it was a 2010 or older, but if you can see these three Freightliners, we put those forward as an option to be replaced, and they were eligible according to the EPA. So so don't let the criteria of a 2010 or older diesel bus dissuade you should you wish to pursue the Clean School Bus Program. Really all you need for it, obviously you've got to write the grant, but really what they're looking for is the title and registration to be scanned in. So make sure you have those documents. You can apply for up to 25 buses. We requested 4. We are down to 3 now, and largely that's just because of the fact that we needed a spare bus. We were having some bus issues, and we needed to make sure that we had a spare to be utilized. So we ended up trading in one of the EPA Clean School Bus Program eligible buses for a gasoline bus. And so it was a 2018 gasoline bus. You are according to the EPA Clean School Bus Program, there's a 20% poverty threshold. So if your free and reduced status is above 20%, you would be characterized as in need. And also, if you have that coupled with a designation of a rural area, you're also more needy, more in need. We do have, through the program, there is an option to be reimbursed at $35,000 if you replace a diesel bus with a propane bus. So we really liked that option of not being required to go EV if it didn't make sense for us. We could still see around $35,000 off the top of a new propane bus. From our conversations with our vendors, that would bring the total price of a new propane bus, a 2024, to be around $100,000. So the advantage is to obviously receiving a full bus for $0 is significantly more. The challenge, as I'll talk about in a minute, is that $20,000 per bus for infrastructure number, and we'll talk about some of the reasons why on this slide, on the next slide, excuse me. Just a little bit of a timeline for you. So August was the deadline for submission. In October, we were notified that we were awarded $1.58 million in rebates. Again, 4 buses and $20,000 per bus for infrastructure. As I alluded, we did have one of those eligible buses traded in for a gasoline bus. We had to make a decision, and we needed to do it quick. Our vendor had a used bus come through, and we jumped right on it. Really, the real work of the EPA Clean School Bus Program occurred between November and January. The week prior to Thanksgiving, I held a conference call with just some of the our vendor, our We Energies, our board members were in attendance. Excuse me, I should say our transportation committee members were in attendance. And then we also had the charger vendor in attendance, and then our local electrician, just to get everybody on the same page. And because there weren't many processes out there, fairly new program, at least in the state of Wisconsin, I was doing a lot of what direction do I go first? And I'll talk a lot about that coming up. In January, we issued RFPs for buses, chargers, and the before the meter installation costs. The one thing that I would say over and over and over again is to, besides engaging your board early and often, engage your utility early and often. Okay, your utility dictates a lot of how this rolls out for you, and the way in which they wrote their tariff is critical. March, so again, went out in January for RFP, and on January 9th, I actually showed this as criteria when I requested the extension of the EPA. On January 9th, I was told by our utility, and this is no disrespect to anybody, I'm not throwing shade at all, but in January, on January 9th, we were told we would have the before the meter installation costs in 2 weeks. All right. I did not receive those until the week of spring break. So that is the end of March. And so that's why it was difficult to go out for RFP to have the after the meter installation costs understood, because we didn't exactly know where the placement for the before the meter, the transformer, and where the electricity would be coming up out of the ground, where it'd be bored to, what that looked like. And so then our local electricians weren't able to adequately bid on it because we didn't know where it was going to be. Now, if you know anything about the EPA Clean Bus Program, you would know that the rebates can be applied towards anything except the before the meter installation costs. So your buses, your chargers, and your charger installation is all covered. But the work before the meter is done through you and your utility. And again, that's why I say engage your utility, understand exactly how their tariff program, because they're all written differently across their state and nation. You need to really understand how that looks in terms of what you're going to need for costs up front with those before the meter costs, and then after you've done the installation, what the charges will be for the electricity used and how you utilize the electricity. More on that in a little bit. If I neglect to go back to it, please prompt me. Anyway, in March, we did make the EPA extension request. I had to have 2 separate chats with a number of members of the EPA Region 5. And in those video chats, I explained our process. I showed them documentation of everything that I had been pursuing and was not available with yet. And actually at that point, in conversing with the EPA, they then also turned to the utility and said, how can we help with this process? This guy's got a deadline. And then I started to see more movement. So I've got a slide on it later, but just know that help is out there. Anyway, early April, I found out the extension was granted. We do have RFPs in process currently. I'm anticipating board action in June. And from what everyone is telling me at this time, if we proceed, we could look at delivery in August, delivery and installation in August for that matter. Through the program, the EPA does have a go live deadline of October of 2024. So things are coming together. just one more comment on the before the meter installation costs. Know that for every foot you bore, that's out of pocket cost. All right, so I would suggest starting with the utility in terms of the actual planning for infrastructure. Where are they going to pull power from? And where do you have it available? For our purposes, we needed a brand new line ramp. We didn't have enough space in our boxes for the load that was required for the chargers that we required. And so we had to have a new line run, which meant a new transformer, which meant higher costs. So really critical pieces there. All right, Joe, if any chats, questions come in, please just let me know, okay?
Yep, you're still good to go.
All right, so I hope you're all still with me. I know I'm a half hour in and I'm just speaking a lot, but this is our story. These are the important considerations. As I said, engage your board and committees early and often. Make sure you bring them along with you every step of the way. We live in a rural conservative area, and there's a lot of skepticism around electric vehicles. There's skepticism around the batteries. There's skepticism around the utilities being in cahoots. So just be prepared for all of that. The bottom line is, what you need to help your board understand is this money is out there, and I find myself asking the question, why not us if it makes sense? Why not put our tax dollars to work just like everybody else is doing? And from my perspective, I'd like to see them go to obviously public schools as opposed to transportation services. But I know they're all important. I'm not throwing shade. Critical to do is assess your routes. And me being a one-man show, my administrative assistant is our transportation coordinator. We did not have the time, nor I'd say the Excel know-how in order to really analyze our routes to see if this would make sense. So not knowing, just know that the charger vendors will assess your routes for you. What we did was we had our drivers track their mileage for 3 weeks. So the better part of a month, every day, we sent all of that data to the charging vendor. We sent our schedules to the charging vendor, and they came up with recommendations for us about which bus routes would work with an EV vision at 120 mile an hour, 120 mile range, and then when we would need to charge those. I've said it before a couple times. Really understand how the tariff program is written and how it impacts you. For example, one of the best ones I saw was out in North Dakota. The utility out in North Dakota wrote their program tariff so that the school district would be waived any peak demand, because they had a requirement that they were going to need to charge but during the AMPN routes, and so that peak demand waiver really was favorable for that school district. Other ones I've seen was a flat rate rebate for specifically just the electric vehicle power box, which allowed the school district to then predict how much electricity was going to be used and what the cost would be for that. Our We Energies rebate tariff was written as a offset for upfront costs to get power to your chargers. And so the way the before the meter cost rebate works for us is the larger charger kilowatt hour charger you put in, the larger the rebate, right? Because from a We Energies perspective, they are counting on that peak demand usage to be the one that reimburses them for offsetting their initial cost. I hope that makes sense. But I cannot understate how critical it is to work with the utility. Your utility will have a person designated just for the EV programs. So find out who that is, connect with them, start understanding how that impacts. From an environment standpoint, you really need to understand, besides regular routes, where else might electric vehicles work. From our perspective, they will likely get us to all of our conference schools and back. And so that's under, for most of them, it's under optimal conditions. You know, on a negative 15-degree day, we probably won't be having them out for co-curriculars. So there's a piece to that. When will they charge? As I had kind of let you know, the peak demand is prohibitive in terms of costs for school districts. But right now we are scheduled to have hours charging after 9 p.m. The plan is anyway, after 9 p.m. and until the morning route. Our plan is to leave them connected simultaneously while they are on the chargers, leave them connected in order for them to heat up. The reason I say that is because the most significant use of electricity is bringing the batteries to the temperature where they can be optimized, and that is one of the most significant drains on your batteries. So always start your buses, bring them up to temp while they're on the charger. In addition, when will they charge? We have a midday 4K route that we've identified as being one that will allow us to go from 8 routes to 7 in total with the use of a microbird, but not knowing exactly if we would have the full range. We will likely need to charge in between AM and PM routes. Obviously, it makes a significant difference if they are being housed in a heated bus barn versus outside, like all of ours are. And so a cold startup versus a 55-degree startup is going to be significantly different. Do be aware that chargers have ongoing costs for software and cellular data. The EPA Clean Bus program is a 5-year program, so you have to run these buses through the program for 5 years, and so just make sure that you have budgeted in for that software and cellular data cost through the life of the program should you be awarded. One of the other pieces that's been exceptionally difficult in all this, at least locally, is while our board has for the most part bought in on the investment, we don't know if this is, because it is so new, we don't know if we're going to continue down this route like we did propane, believing that battery ranges will continue to improve. So we're trying to pursue a longer range vision, identifying a location for a bus barn, an opportunity to plug in all of our buses at some point. And so just don't, when you're doing a lot of these, particularly the before the meter utility, if you want any type of additional building, additional fleet, think about those now, as opposed to later being caught in a situation like we're in, where we're having to move buses because snow piles get too big. So just things to think about. And then I commented previously with regard to the diesel propane, how diverse does your fleet need to be? We only go to La Crosse 1 time per year for the state track meet. And so really, do we need a bus that can take us 800 miles? The answer probably, yeah, at some point. But do we need a lot of them? Probably not, right? So we will have and continue to have a diversified fleet, and just like our drivers, they want a little bit of some options. And then it's really important to know what the plan is for chargers in our area. The infrastructure plan that the state has laid out is pretty positive as I read it. But one critical piece you need to be aware of in terms of the EV component is that most of the buses now need level 3 chargers. These are not your level 2 chargers that can be utilized for residential purposes. These are level 3 chargers. And I know that there's a significant amount of discussion about why that's not advantageous for us statewide. And the answer is simply because of the fact that now I need to go and find another level 3 charger. I just can't drive to Menards and hook into one of those Tesla superchargers, right? If I need to power a bus. So while there is a plan in place, the infrastructure, at least for the EV buses right now, is not supportive of anything beyond our geographic route locations. Okay. Do I anticipate it will be? Absolutely. But right now it's not looking like that. The end of 5 years and $5 billion being injected into this program, I would believe it would. Okay, that was a lot there. Any questions from anybody? Yeah, it's because I've talked too much. Huh? All right. Let's move on then. All right, so the data. I have around 13 pages of data that I just took notes on from people that have had experience with this. First off, what I want to show you is the Lomira route analysis that we got from the charging company. And what's really nice about that is we had the opportunity to select which kilowatt charger we were looking at. And I'll explain more about the ICE 30 versus the ICE 60 here in a little bit. But you can see we have, these are our passengers. These are the times. And then obviously we talked a little bit about that shuttle from Lomira to Theresa. These were some of the vehicle specs just that we had to account for. Here is our schedule that they came up with. Oh no. I swear last night at midnight, these were populating. I'm sorry. But the bottom line is we had a conversation about these, and based on the kilowatt hours used versus the opportunity to charge them, we made recommendations, and we found that there were 4 routes that we could utilize electric bus vehicles for on an everyday basis. Same thing here. I was looking at, again, understanding the peak demand charges versus your non-peak hours. And so I had asked them to also do a overnight charging only. And you can see here, we had 5 bus routes that would not be able to complete their AM and PM routes on the overnight charge alone. All right, so just know that is not an analysis you need to do yourself. It was incredibly helpful, a monumentous moment for us once we knew exactly how this would fit. And again, I apologize about those pieces. Just a few pieces of data that I collected from other school districts. This one is from Osseo in Minnesota. And I'll draw your attention to just a couple pieces here. One of the things that Osseo had is they do not have an all-electric bus. Well, they do, but it has a diesel heating source. And so just across the top, you can see here that we've got 3 months of, and I wanted the cold weather pieces more importantly. You could see that they've done some calculations on the electricity cost per month. Here they have a diesel fuel space heater what you'll find on a lot of the electric vehicles that were put out anywhere between 2014 and 2018. But they're spending around $169, $170 per month just in diesel fuel to heat the buses. Now on the positive side, you don't need to leave your electric vehicle plugged in to bring it up to temp. And so as a part of this was for the Volkswagen settlement that they had, so they had to track a lot of these. I'm not exactly sure about their operation and maintenance cost per mile. To me, there's some additional factors there. I believe the additional factor would be the hourly rate of the driver, because this isn't close to what I saw in other school districts. But the bottom line is they were seeing some significant savings across fuel prices. Next, Osseo. Oh, I'm sorry, that was the one I just clicked on. Crago, so this is Nebraska. They tracked it a little bit differently as well. But what I would highlight for you here is the averages, right? So January, February, March, the cold weather months averages, the spring averages, and then obviously summer into fall. The way that they, so you can see they have a total billing period. They have the total kilowatt hours they utilized, the rate that they were getting per kilowatt hours. Very important to understand how that looks from a utility standpoint. Tracking the buses. Another really important piece, as you're looking at any data, is how many total days that the bus was used. For a lot of the districts I spoke to, I should say most of the districts I spoke to, didn't bring their electric vehicle buses out when it was -15. They just didn't want to subject the batteries to freezing temperatures. For us, we're not going to have an option. They're going to start froze, and we're going to have to warm them up because we're going to want them on the road. So what they did was they have a hybrid system, and so they are utilizing diesel, and then they are utilizing electric, and then they tracked the amount of percentage of the route that was utilized for on electric. And so they were seeing some significant cost savings. Again, period savings for this bus. Again, those are good numbers, particularly when we see the price of diesel. The most significant one I saw was from West Fargo. Really, this is the one that I think pointed to the possibilities. And what's unique about the West Fargo data is that they bought a 2019 electric EV Vision, and then they also bought a 2019 diesel, two diesels. So this is apples to apples comparison, same model bus, same routes, but just two diesels versus the EV. And the very first year was in 1920. And again, the number one thing that you really got to look at is the days they had it in operation. Okay. But here they're tracking operation and maintenance, and then they break it down into cost per mile. Okay. And we are very similar in terms of cost per mile from a diesel perspective. We are operating around a 41 cent per mile for our diesels, and I believe part of that is because of our internal tech, but also because we don't have as many diesels to maintain. So the other one, they were operating at 40 cents per mile, but then you come down here to the electric bus, and it's operating at 14 cents per mile. Okay, now that's an estimated 28 cents of savings per mile driven, and an annual savings of $3,269. Now that's year one. And what you'll notice is when it gets cold out, they don't operate this bus. Again, year one, they were not comfortable bringing that bus out when it was cold. Moving into 2021, similar operating costs for the diesel per mile, but they're getting it down to 11 cents with the electric. Still have a similar savings, okay? But again, January, February, March, more days of operation drive that cost per mile down. It could have been a mild winter, more mild winter. I don't really recall that, but again, they were operating it more, and maybe that was just a cold November, or it was out of service, so it was out for repair. The 21-22 data, again, 52 cents per mile on the diesel, 46 cents on the other one, down to 9 cents on the electric vehicle for a grand savings of $6,000. Now this, again, this is per route savings realized by the school district. And again, days in operation, okay? And again, they've had some things that happen, right? But you can see the more you use it, the better the savings. And then moving into this year, and obviously I was doing data collection, so I'm only through October here, but they were at 59 cents per mile, 51 cents, and then 7 cents with regard to the electric vehicles. And in only 2 months, having the bus out there for 34 days, they had saved $1,700. So this is really, really great data. Certainly speaks to the cost that you could see, and it made sense for us to move forward from there. Any questions? Joe, are you still on the chat?
Yes, nothing in the chat right now.
All right, cool. One of the things that, obviously there's a lot of considerations if you're looking to move into EVs. Our routes, we were planning at 70 miles. Oops, I'm sorry. At 70 miles, knowing that we would be using around 147 kilowatt hours to charge them. The amount of time it takes at 7 hours, we knew we could not have a 30 kilowatt rated charger because we needed it to be 6 hours or less. And so that prompted us to move up to the 3-hour charger, which is the i60. And again, the reason you see the gray here is because this is a level 2 charger, and it's not conducive to the battery that we're looking at here. Again, do not look at any of the ideal conditions. Plan as if we're Wisconsin. Plan as if you're going to have a snow day in April, and the fact that you might not be able to use these buses. So just cold weather assumptions always. So we're looking at around 3 hours to fully charge a bus. And that is advantageous to us because they can get back here at around 8:15, and we're sending them out for the 4K midday route shortly thereafter. And then we get them back, and they've got another 3 hours that they can be charged and utilized either to run a route or to run kids to an event. Here's the chargers that we looked at. Again, so the ICE 80 wasn't conducive in terms of what we were told we needed, which was a level 3 charger. So we were looking entirely at the 3 on the right. This is the pricing piece, the pricing informational sheet that we were provided. And you can see the hardware on the DC fast charger, it's $18,000. The DC fast charger only charges 1 bus at a time. So sequentially, And for us, that wasn't going to fit our needs. At the same time, our needs we were looking at were obviously we were awarded 4 buses that dropped down to 3. We still believe 3 makes sense for us, but we are not locked into having to charge all 3 at one time in order to use them. So that was advantageous. So we looked at the ICE 60, the 60 kilowatt DC fast charger that can charge 2 buses simultaneously in 3 hours. And so we were looking at, 36,694. And when you think about it, wow, that sounds great. We're getting 20,000 per bus in terms of infrastructure. So this 36,694 cost would be covered by the program, but that's not always reality. So I'm gonna just show you what I did was I got 3 separate quotes. I got a quote for the ICE 60 by itself under 5 years, the entire life of the EPA program. I would advise you to plan in that way, just so that you don't have these ongoing costs beyond the life of the program. If at the end of 5 years, our school district wants to break away, we can do that free and clear. If we want to continue on with it, those cellular data and software charges, obviously we'll need to have a new contract for that. But the one you're looking at here is an ICE 60 and an ICE 30. So 90 kilowatts in total, the opportunity to charge 3 buses all at once. They have a $1,500 startup fee. They have a $750 testing for when you get it set up. And then here is the cost for the software, and then here is your data plan. Again, so those are charges that do add up. You can utilize the rebate, the EPA Clean School Bus Program for all of these charges. All right, you can't go beyond the 5 years, so that's why you see 60 months here. But again, then you've got a couple other add-on charges. So in total, for us to get an ICE 60 and an ICE 30 was $62,306. So significant, and that is more than the $60,000 we were going to be allotted, and it doesn't include the installation. Okay, so this is the moment where we really realized this might take some out-of-pocket cost from the school district budget. Any questions about kind of any of the EV chargers? Okay, moving along. This is our return on the investment. Okay, we are planning for a 71 passenger Bluebird Vision at a cost of $375,000. That is the maximum amount of rebate you will receive. So we appreciate, excuse me, we appreciate our vendor sticking within the confines of what the rebate program offers. So you can see the cost here, followed by the reimbursement rebate. Same thing. And then, as I said to you, we are looking at a microbird, an electric microbird, to handle either some of our midday routes or just even a separate route that will optimize a lot of our other routes. And so a 29 passenger microbird made sense for us. So that is $285,000. And then obviously I told you a little bit about the We Energies location, the We Energies and the before the meter cost. So right now, right now, We Energies has quoted us at $43,893.48 for the before the meter costs. Now that is only with a 60 kilowatt charger. So the ICE 60, so one charger that can charge 2 buses at one time. The before the meter cost is $43,000. The rebate we get based on the 60 kilowatt charger is $26,267. Now, if we were to go up to the 90 kilowatt chargers, so that's the ICE 30 and the ICE 60, the rebate would go up around $12,000. And again, that's because they are giving you the rebate based on how much load you're going to be putting during their peak hours. So if we were to go with the 90, we would really only be paying around $4,000 for the before the meter costs. Okay. Now, if you go up to the charger, if you go up to the 90, the ICE 60, the ICE 60 is at $42,229. Okay, and that's the ICE 60 at 60 months. So that was $42,229, and I put the entire $40,000 of the EPA Clean Bus Program there. So really only $2,229 of the charger and software and data costs over the life of the EPA program. Only around $2,200 of it is not covered from the infrastructure. Then the charger installation. So we went out to RFP to our local electricians, and the low dollar amount that came back to us was $22,950, and so I put the other $20,000 infrastructure to offset those costs. So around $3,000 out of pocket for the actual installation of the charger. So at the bottom here, you can see the totals. The cost to the district is 1.14. And when you have the rebates that I have outlined here, it comes to around $22,805 in terms of out-of-pocket costs for the school district. Now that was not budgeted expense. Obviously, we'd look to use our Fund 46 to cover that amount. With the if we went up to say the $62,000 ICE 30 and ICE 90 over the 60-month term, out-of-pocket costs of the district would be around $25,000. Okay. Now that number is probably going to be inflated because all of the electricians were really basing the installation of only one charger, not two. The installation wouldn't be a whole lot more, but it would obviously inflate that cost. And then just looking at it from a return on the investment piece, we estimate that we will see consistent EV bus usage on 2 of our routes consistently, and we averaged a fairly conservative number of $5,000 in fuel savings over the life of the program. And so $5,000, 2 routes, that's $10,000 in savings over the life of the program, $50,000. So if you want to make some assumptions, again, big rocks here. The district would, for all intents and purposes in planning, be coming out having saved $25,000 at the end of the program. And again, fairly conservative in terms of our number of savings of $5,000. But that was what our board kind of felt, not our board, our committee, our transportation committee felt comfortable with in terms of the data that we had discussed. So that's what it looks like so far. And I know I'm jumping around a little bit. There is a lot to it. I'm neck deep in it right now. I conduct weekly calls with the people to keep all the balls in the air. So I haven't fully processed this whole story. And so that might seem why I'm jumping around a little bit. I do want you to understand that help is out there. I will be pursuing from Renew Wisconsin a $10,000 grant. It's called EVs for Good. I'm going to look to that to offset some of the costs, the upfront costs. The World Resources Institute is a really great place that provides resources just in terms of this is where government is going, their future planning is. They provide you that electric school bus market study has a lot of great information, but you can also sign up for free one-on-one conversations with their with their staff just by clicking that link. And obviously I'll make all of this available to all of you. So if you want to go down that route, you can. I do want to make everyone aware, because I was not aware until Francisco from Renew Wisconsin informed me, but there is a energy innovation grant through the Wisconsin Public Service Commission, and that can provide up to $50,000 for organizations, and public schools, transportation providers fall into that, up to $50,000. I had started to write that grant, knowing that we were going to come up short and there was going to be a tax dollar usage. And so I had thought to cover the rest of our costs with that $50,000 grant. I couldn't pull together all of the pieces. Like I had said, I was looking, I had went out to RFP in January, and I would have needed those numbers back in order to make my case for that grant. I believe that grant is back out in November of this year. And I believe, again, the due date is late January. As I had mentioned a couple of times, there is a local utility person who is solely responsible for commercial EV implementation. I would encourage you to make calls to them before you apply for the EPA Clean School Bus Program. It makes a whole lot more sense to start there. And then again, second step, analyze your routes. As I had talked about, once I applied for the EPA extension, because it was due April 28th, so coming up here in 10 days, I had gotten put in touch with the EPA Region 5 rep. Tyler's a knowledgeable guy, but he also heads the Wisconsin Clean School Bus Coalition. They conduct conference calls for people who are interested in moving to this direction on Wednesdays. And so if you want to write to him and ask to be put on those, it's just a good networking piece and understanding what people are doing and why. And then just I would be happy to be a support for anybody who's navigating down either propane or electric vehicles down that pathway, because there is a lot to learn, and it's hard to know really where to start. So I hope people can learn from my mistakes in timing, and use it to be efficient and pursue this. So that's what I got. Oh, I had to share this with you. I hope you can hear it. I've been waiting decades to actually have relevance to share this, because I say it so often to my staff. And of course, it's not loading. What do you know? Well, we'll skip it. While that's loading, I'll yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, all right. So not too many questions in the chat, Joe. I think I must have put him to sleep.
No, Ty, this is great information. Anybody looking as alternative options for school buses was able to glean your experience and it's less than a year that you went through all this work and planning. And, I can tell from, presentation that you went through a lot of studying and conversations and work to make that happen for the school district of Lomira. So kudos to you for that. We did see some information in the chat. We are going to get this posted out so people can see the slides that are there. If you have any other questions, Ty gave his information at the end, or reach out to WASBO and we can get that to you as well if you're not able to find it again. But any last questions? We did also want to thank Verigy again for sponsoring our webinar today. We sure appreciate that. Be sure that you try and complete the evaluation that will be emailed out to you shortly after this. And we appreciate for joining today. There is one other question. It says, Ty, any guesses when you'll actually get your buses arriving at the door?
Yeah, crazy as it sounds. So when we initially started discussing it in January, lead time was 8 months. And so that is still the case. And so we're anticipating delivery and install in August. Ready for the school year.
No time to spare there, huh, Ty?
Yeah, it's coming quick.
Yeah. Well, let me just add to Joe's comments. Ty, thank you. Congratulations to you for the obvious effort that you've put into this. You know, as I'm one of those many people who cuts through Lamira to get to Highway 41. You know, signs that say like no solar, you know, and so I appreciate how aware you are of, you know, of your community and your board. That's really super important. So obviously you've overcome a lot of obstacles here, and you know, I'm convinced that 10 years from now, this will all be standard practice, right? And I shared with Joe an article from about a decade ago when Oconomowoc Transport, which is now I think a Right Way franchise, but Oconomowoc Transport took advantage of some federal money that was coming out of the Great Recession, 2011 or so. And they were in that first wave of, it was actually a beautiful design. It was solar panels all the way down the bus line and charging the buses. And then there were hybrid buses of battery with diesel backup. And there's a lot of federal money involved in it. Unfortunately, the product just wasn't ready. You know, they really underachieved. And I think that, you know, for the last decade, it kind of went quiet. You know, so it's great to see some innovation coming back into the school bus fleets around the country with different alternative fuels and trying to reduce emissions. Because this stuff is never easy. So I just wanted to say on behalf of WASBO, thank you for your efforts here. Everybody can learn a lot off of you, and appreciate your willingness to coach others if need be. I hope I didn't just volunteer you, but
No, it's all good.
You're certainly the guy in the know. So back to you, Joe.
Yes, Ty, just a couple more questions came through. Do you know when the next time you can apply for the federal electric bus grant is?
Yep. So it should be June through August. So they're offering 500 million each year up until 2026. So you should be able to be doing that when throughout the summer when there's nothing else going on. Yep, so that's good. Any other questions?
One more, it just says, have you seen any large school districts receiving grants that outsource busing?
Yeah, and I would say that if you Google it and I think it's awardees or recipients, you'll see that the majority of awardees are from transportation services or larger school districts. I think that the EPA, and I'm not speaking for anyone here, but they see the most significant advantage in more metropolitan areas. It makes more sense. The routes are smaller, more compact, more buildings. And so I think there's a push to see how it does in the rural areas. And that's why you saw that being a specific piece of as a part of the program. But absolutely, large districts, large transportation providers, and even the bus builders themselves can help you write these grants. So be aware of that too. Good question.
Ty, just a question I had, did they bring any buses to Lomira? Okay.
We were gonna have to drive 8 hours to see one.
Okay.
But I must tell you, it was a conversation we had because my drivers and my transportation committee are that interested in the operation. So we kind of went down that route, had the conversation, but ultimately it wasn't going to be an apples to apples comparison with the bus we were getting. So we decided against it.
Hey, Joe, as a former business manager in a large urban, in my case, it was Madison, and the district contracted out for all of its bus services. We took the easy way out. Yeah, we wrote it into our RFP and our contract that said by X year, 10% of your fleet will be on alternative fuels, or 20%, and we had this ladder out about 6 years. So for us, I mean, talk about the easy way. Ty has had to do all this work. All we did was write it into our contract, and we made the bus company do all the work. That can probably only work in the much bigger environments where there's enough scale there. But who knows? There's new changes and new opportunities like these new federal dollars every couple of years. So
yeah, the money is out there. Why not us?
Yeah, exactly. So, but I guess the larger point is, don't be afraid when if you have contracted services, you can still impart your values onto the carrier and say, this is what we expect. Our board needs this, our community wants this, it's a way to teach kids and so on. And you can start small. We want 1 bus, 2 buses to be alternative fuels or whatever. Just because you're contracting now doesn't mean you have to sit on the sidelines.
All right, well, great. I don't see any additional questions. Ty, again, one more time, thank you. This took some time for you to prepare and present. And, on behalf of WASBO and all the webinar participants today and those who might see the recording, we sure appreciate it. Hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Ty.
Thank you.